Good morning, everyone. I'm going to call the meeting to order for the Legislative Committee. And we'll start with our reports.
Good morning, brother.
Hey, bud.
Various members. Yes.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I was distracted a moment. Excuse me. I'm sorry.
Okay.
We got the answer to these
All right.
problems. I've been working on it. We're gonna be on for ledge, but I've been, the engineer is pop-ups. But I think.
Dr. Parker, I think you need to be on mute.
Sorry, for the disturbance.
I
Okay, that's good now. Okay. So we have with us by remote Dr. Parker, Mayor McKellen, and Supervisor Rutherford. And we will be having our reports from Washington and Sacramento as usual by
Madam Chair said that you won't have to go back again. Dr. Burke is here. He's just sitting on the side a little bit, but you may want to invite him to.
Yes, good morning,
You're
Dr.
welcome.
Burke. Would you accept an appointment to sit on this committee this morning?
Good morning.
You can't see him. He's sitting on the side a little bit, but he'll be around just a moment.
Can you hear me? Dr. Burke, I would like to appoint you to the committee. Will you accept?
Great.
Here he is. Good morning, Dr. Burke.
How are you this morning?
Thank you. And so we'll get started. Dr. Burke has just joined us, and the first item on the agenda is the report that we have from on federal issues. And the first one is Barry Leitchmore from the Congress. Barry, tell us what's going on and updates. We have your written report, but we think some things may have happened since your written report. So please give us an update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is Gary. I appreciate that. Couple of things. My report focuses on the executive branch, the White House, and federal agency developments. Just a couple of general notes on the topic of infrastructure. It's something we're following very closely. The president continues to talk about pushing a major infrastructure bill at some point. It's sort of on the semi-back burner now with tax reform and other things crowding the legislative agenda at the moment. But there continue to be developments on the infrastructure bill in terms of just there's no bill, there's no administration bill, but there is a general administration principles on it. Just to recap, the White House is saying they want to invest $200 billion over 10 years of federal money and have that money leverage another $800 billion to become $1 trillion in investment over 10 years in infrastructure. Now, the Democrats in Congress are balking at that, and they want a much bigger federal investment up front. And so the possible compromise you're looking at down the road is for the administration to kick in a lot more money into it at some point. Meantime, as we watch this, of course, we're looking in our advocacy efforts to try to get a set aside within that for clean air infrastructure investment as well. So we're continuing to follow that. Now, we were very interested to see, as my report says, in July, the president announced an infrastructure advisory council of 15 members were going to be appointed in the Department of Commerce, make recommendations. But what happened in August is that this was quietly abandoned, just as several other major advisory committees of the president were abandoned when the controversy erupted over the president's remarks about the Charlottesville incident, and several major CEOs walked away from the economic and manufacturing advisory councils. The president and his administration decided to just quietly put the infrastructure council on the shelf. So I don't think that's going to go forward at this point. So that's the update there. He did announce this environmental review executive order reiterating certain things that are already in the works to streamline the permitting process to expedite infrastructure projects. This is designed to try to get more private investment into infrastructure. This executive order also repealed an Obama administration executive order on climate change that was basically telling agencies they would have to factor in climate change into their decision-making on infrastructure projects, factoring in projected sea level rise and flooding issues caused by climate change. But that's been repealed by the Trump administration executive order. So those are a couple of quick updates there. In terms of other federal agency developments here in recent days, just a new one to point out is that the Department of Transportation just announced its next round of Tiger grants is going to go forward. They're making $500 million available for major transportation infrastructure projects. Applications will be due on October 16th. These are projects between $5 million and $25 million. We've seen in the past that some of these projects do provide infrastructure for clean air related developments. So we always keep an eye on that, and I know the agency will be looking at that very carefully. Another one just to point out, the Federal Aviation Administration over the summer here has issued a number of discretionary grants under its airport improvement program. These grants go out for airport runways and other developments around airports. And just going through the list, I noticed that several of these grants that they have made just recently do provide funding for low emission and zero emission vehicles, as well as charging infrastructure around certain airports. So those are some of the eligibilities that go into that program. So that's something of interest to keep an eye on. One other quick development to note would be the appointment of a new general counsel at the Environmental Protection Agency. Matt Leopold, former Florida Department of Environmental Protection, has been named as the new general counsel for the Environmental Protection Agency. So that's a quick recap and update from my report. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Gary. Are there any questions from committee members to Mr. Weitzman? No, seeing none. Any questions from staff on the report? Okay. We'll move on then to Cassidy and Associates, and I believe we have Amelia Jenkins on the phone to give that report. Could you please give us an update on your report, Amelia?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. This is Amelia Jenkins with Cassidy and Associates, and we have our team here in D.C. Available if there are any questions. Mostly we summarize the latest development in our report that we submitted to the board. Just a couple of other updates. The House Appropriations Committee continues to work its way through the spending bill package, which includes EPA funding. We had flagged an amendment offered by Mr. Palmer of Alabama that would have cut funding for DERA grants. As of this time, Mr. Palmer has not offered that amendment to the bill yet. Mr. Grijalva of Arizona did offer an amendment to restore the environmental justice funding that was cut. and that amendment was narrowly defeated. I'll use narrowly defeated last night on a vote of 190 to 218. So they're going to continue working through these amendments. It is a package of 8 bills, and then they've added the 4 national security bills that previously passed. But because both the Senate and the House have passed the debt ceiling, Harvey relief, and CR, we don't anticipate the final spending package will be resolved until probably the middle or end of December. One other update, and I'm maybe jumping on some other consultants' toes here, but yesterday there was the announcement of the nomination of William, I think it's Wareham, who is an attorney at Hutton and Williams, to be the air administrator at EPA. And we can forward you additional information about him, but it looks like he's been identified as the new nominee for the head of the air program there.
Okay, thank you very much. Is the DERA amount still at 100 million? Where is it now? 75 million, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
75, yes, ma'am.
75 million, okay, thank you.
I have a question.
We have a question from Dr. Barker. Go ahead, Dr. Barker.
When the continuing funding bill the resolution was passed, what was the actual vote on that bill?
So the 90 people in the House yes, sir, 90 people in the House objected to that. I don't have the vote breakdown, but it was 90 was the opposition vote.
Okay.
So I guess it's 310 to 90.
Any other questions from other members? Seems none are coming forward, so thank you very much, Amelia, for your report. And we'll move on to Kadish and Associates, and I believe we have Mark Kadish on the phone. Good morning, Mark.
Hi, good morning, Madam Chair. Good morning, everyone. I will just say everything gets covered in our report, and I think the update on Congress was pretty thorough by Amelia. As she pointed out, the hurricane relief, the continuing resolution of debt will pass through December 8th. So we'll see most of these issues come back in early December, and we'll have a number of showdowns then. The only thing I would add to her report on the Palmer Amendment on DERA is that I think we should note that a member of our delegation, the Interior Appropriations Chair, Mr. Calvert, was prepared to stand up and oppose the DERA cuts, which I think is very helpful for us. And we should just take note. He obviously is the one who's been pushing the hardest for us and cares most about DERA. So that was nice that he was prepared to stand up and fight the amendment. Other than that, I think what I had to say has been covered in Congress, and happy to take questions. I don't want to take any more of your time.
Thank you, Mark. Any questions for Mark Kadish? Seeing none, thank Congressman Calvert for us when you have a chance to visit him next. We appreciate his efforts to get the DERA money for us. And now we'll move on to state representatives. First one up is Paul Gonzalez, I believe, from Gonzalez and Sons. Good morning, Paul.
Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. Happy Friday to everyone. I just wanted to give a brief update to my report. As you know, we have 1 week as of today left in the legislative session. A large focus of that is right now is currently on the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund spending plan, the GGRF funds that come out of cap and trade. The legislature has until, because of the 72-hour in print rule, the legislature has until about Tuesday to get something in print. There's nothing really in print yet, and the bills will have to go back through Budget Committee, and negotiations are still going on, but the governor in the meantime has released his spending plan, which includes about $1.5 billion and he breaks it down for $350 million for AB 617. That's the air monitoring program that was tied to the cap and trade extension. He's got $300 million for community action plans, another $45 million for state and local implementation costs, and then another $5 million for assistance to community groups. He's got another $607 million going to low carbon transportation for the CVRP, for freight hubs and zero emission freight equipment, enhanced fleet modernization program, the clean bus and truck voucher incentive program, and some agricultural engine replacement upgrades. Then he's also has he's identified $170 million for sustainable agriculture, another $305 million for fire suppression, fire prevention, and local fire response. Then about $40 million for waste diversion, $5 million for clean energy, and about $20 million for energy efficiency, and $2 million for energy research at the University of California. So all that being said, I would say this is a kickoff point for the governor. I know he's gotten some pushback in some of the areas, especially with how much money is being spent in fire prevention. As my report outlines, the Pro Tem came out with, Senator Pro Tem De Leon came out with his own proposal. So there's a number of competing interests, but from our conversations with staff and with leadership is that they're hoping to have some type of bill in print by today or early next week so they can start the budget process and get the bill on the floor and pass with the 72 hours in print. So we've been working closely with all of the stakeholders. We've aligned ourselves with many people, including other air districts and other stakeholders that care about air quality, to try and maximize the amount of money coming to the district. And we're hoping to see some type of language and numbers, like I said, either by today or early next week. So we will continue to keep you apprised on this and continue to press hard to try and get as much funding as we can for the district. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Great, thank you very much, Paul. This is a critical time, isn't it? Questions for Mr. Gonzalez? Anyone want to proceed with questions?
Go ahead.
Dr. Burke,
I have a question, Madam Chair.
please go ahead.
I wanted, from my understanding, there's been different levels of economic interest in this bill from the governor and President Pro Tem and the Speaker's office. I wanted to know if Mark Cage knew what those numbers are from each individual office.
Okay, this is Paul Gonzalez. I think the question is for him, right? Dr. Burke? Yes.
I'm sorry.
So Dr. Burke, this is Paul Gonzalez. Good morning. Those numbers are unclear right now. I think everybody's numbers are all over the place, and that's what the negotiations are going on right now. I would say that the governors, and what I can do is I can send over to your office or to Wayne and your staff the breakdowns. There's really nothing in print that has any real numbers other than the governor's proposal. Everybody else is just floating ideas out there and negotiating what they can get. But I'm happy to send over what the governor has laid out specifically.
Well, then how did I get to 950, the 650, and the 150 number?
Hey, Paul, this is
Well,
Wayne.
those are numbers that are being.
I thought that the Pro
Go ahead,
Tem
Wayne.
also came out with numbers that we received from Kip.
I thought that was a press release.
I think within the press
This
release.
is Will Gonzalez.
Go ahead, Will.
I was just going to say, Paul's correct. The only thing officially on the street right now is the governor's proposal. The Pro Tem has put out his outline in a press release, quite frankly, but we do expect, as Paul said, either today or early Monday to see a bill drop in the legislature. So to Paul's point, we don't have any concrete numbers. Things look good. I would say things look in a good direction. The Pro Tem is really, I think, pushing to get as much to diesel reduction as possible, but we don't have anything official coming out of the Pro Tem yet.
But you expect bill language today, is what I hear you're saying. Is that correct?
That's correct, Madam Chair.
Okay.
Correct.
All right.
Is that a bill will be voted on this year,
Oh,
in this session?
it's got to be next week.
Yes, Dr. Burke's right.
Yes, Dr. Parker, because of the 72-hour in print rule, they have to have language in print by Tuesday in order to be able to pass the bill, and they will pass something this year on the spending plan.
Any other questions? Okay, a lot of negotiating going on right now over that money. And I understand there's about $1.5 billion in the fund.
Yes. 4.4 or 5.
Okay, all right, so the money's on the table. It's time for us to put our hands on the table and get some. Okay, thank you. And we'll go to you now, and you can add any updates that we haven't yet discussed. So please go ahead. Good morning, Will.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members. Will Gonzalez. Actually, I just want to give a quick addition to Paul's comment. I think AQMD staff, I just want to give kudos, has been working hard. There's been a lot of and just constant requests from AQMD staff for data requests and background on programs and where the need is. And we have, I think, a once in a decade kind of opportunity here to get significant funding for diesel reduction. And, we've all been working hard, but the amount of time and effort that the legislature has been taking of AQMD staff has been pretty incredible in the last few months. So, as Wayne said, the session's over in a week. So hopefully in a week we'll have some good news for you. But I think we're in a good place so far on overall GGRS funding. Besides that, I was going to kick it over to Jacob Moss from my office to give you guys an update on our other huge priority, which is AB 1074, our Moyer funding bill.
Great, thank you.
Thanks.
Good morning, Jacob. Go ahead. This is Jacob Moss with his report.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thanks, Will. AB 1274, just a quick update. I know it's not quite as exciting as 1.5 billion, but it's still substantial. It's a 2/3 vote. It did make it out of Senate Appropriations off the suspense file on the 1st of September, and is going to be hopefully taken up on Monday on the Senate floor. After that, it'll need to head back to the Assembly for a concurrence vote, which will also be 2/3, and then hopefully on to the governor's office after that. There were some amendments made in the Appropriations Committee that increased the fee charged to the driver by $1 and sent that dollar to BAR. So BAR is now made whole on the cost of the smog certificates that they would have otherwise have lost from the deferred smog check. So we hope that will encourage the governor to sign the bill, because we're not taking money from the smog program and sort of redirecting it to a different program. And that's my only update.
Thank you, Jacob. Just for clarification to our staff, what now is the share that goes to the South Coast on this bill?
So I think the estimate of this was about 44% of the revenue from this would be shared through the Carl Moyer program, and estimates have ranged from as low as 53 million up to close to 70 million per year statewide. So I'd say 30 million, 30 to 40 million, something like that.
It's in the health and safety code. From the money that is collected, about 43% based on the population percentage of South Coast comes to us. Then the rest is distributed among other air districts. The others have a formula of both population and severity of air pollution. The formula is agreed upon between CAPWA and ARB. So this additional funding will follow the same formula.
And we anticipate, as I understand, about 30 million from this fund?
At least. It will slightly more than double our share. Right now, the state can collect up to $69 million a year. It depends on the car sales volume and
Right.
based on the economy. But right now, the max is capped around 69 million, which will more than double.
Good, okay. Do members have any questions on this issue, on the report from the Gonzalez firm? Seeing none, thank you very much to all of our consultants from state and federal for your reports this morning. The next item on the agenda is an update on AB 617. And Philip Crabb is going to give us that update and let us know what we have to do now that we didn't have to do before.
Yes.
And how we think we'll pay for it.
Right.
If we know that. Go ahead,
Right.
Philip.
Sure. Good morning, Madam Chair and committee members. AB 617 was signed into law on July 26th and is a companion measure to AB 398 by Eduardo Garcia, which extended the cap and trade program until 2030. AB 617 is meant to address concerns about disproportionate air quality burdens faced by disadvantaged communities and focuses on a comprehensive suite of actions to reduce community-level health impacts of criteria pollutants and toxic air contaminant emissions from large stationary sources. The bill mandates several new programs and responsibilities on the South Coast and other local air districts, including community monitoring and analysis involving the development and implementation of community air monitoring systems, review of analysis and data associated with the monitoring, and data submission to CARB. Also, the development and implementation of community emission reduction programs through a public process and in collaboration with CARB. Air districts must identify the communities affected by a high cumulative exposure burden based on existing and new monitoring data, emissions, and risk information. As new monitoring data is gathered, it's possible that additional sources previously unidentified through testing and modeling will need to be also added, and emissions, and to track corresponding reductions in community exposure. Third, there is best available retrofit control technology implementation, which involves new BART assessments and subsequent amendments to AQMD rules to require new and existing BART level controls for current reclaim facilities. And finally, uniform emission reporting, which requires a modification of AQMD's annual emission reporting system, which tracks air contaminants emissions from permitted facilities. These modifications are needed to accommodate additional reporting procedures for a statewide uniform emission reporting system created under AB 617. Also under this bill, CARB will develop a state strategy to identify communities with high cumulative pollutant impacts, identify community reduction measures, and assist local air districts with developing community action plans and perform enforcement activities. They will also establish and maintain a statewide clearinghouse that identifies BACT, BART, and related technologies for the control of toxic air pollutants. And they will also develop statewide uniform reporting methodologies for criteria pollutants and toxic air contaminants from stationary sources. Finally, the bill also increases civil and criminal penalties for air pollution violations, adjusting strict liability penalty limits which have not been increased for decades, and requires inflation adjustments for all penalty limits going forward. Overall, this bill creates multiple unfunded mandates on local air districts. Staff estimates the total cost for the district to implement AB 617 through the year 2039 is nearly $250 million, or an average of nearly $11 million per year. Thus, AQMD continues to work hard to seek funding resources to cover the added cost of these newly created requirements. That's my report.
Thank you. Okay, go ahead. We'd like to hear from our executive officer on this.
Madam Chair, if I could add to what Philip has said. We've been working very hard on the 617 implementation, particularly as the funding comes out. As you know, when the governor was promoting 398 and 617, we were very vocal that we needed the funding. We didn't get the funding at the time, but there was the so-called promise. In the latest governor's proposal, there's $45 million for the implementation of 617. Of that, 18 million currently is designated to go to ARB. 27 million is designated to go to the districts. That 27 million number came from the number that we had actually provided to the Division of Finance and to the staff of the legislative members. It was the low end of our range for the first year. And the intent for the legislature is to go back and do a couple of things. One is to try to tie it to future GGRF revenues. And then if that doesn't work, then to go back for future funding for further implementation. But if the 27 million, we think more than half of that will go to us, which was along the lower lines of what we had estimated in terms of resources necessary to bring on the FTE and the equipment to move forward. So part of what both Paul and Will and Jacob talked about was the ongoing negotiations. So many of us were in Sacramento yesterday talking to key staff on those funding levels. So we're heavily engaged on this issue, and as all of the consultants said, things look pretty positive from where we are. So we're going to keep our fingers crossed and continue to work the issue all the way up through next Friday night.
So is that 27 million over what period of time? Per year?
Well,
Year one.
it's year one.
Year one.
Yeah.
Okay. So if we think our cost will be 11 million, and you think we're going to get about 13.5 million of this,
About that.
then
We'll be whole.
We'll be whole. We'll be okay.
As long as we keep pressing on it.
Well, and then the other thing that will affect this is the revenue from the auctions, whether it continues to be. It was like 937,000 or something like that. I mean, yeah, that 900,000 didn't go very far. And 900 was close to $1 billion the last time that they auctioned. So the revenues are up over what they had done previously before they extended the cap and trade program. So, any questions from anyone on these issues? But on 617. Dr. Burke, anything to add?
No.
Okay. I do have a question. Now that there are increased requirements with respect to BARCT, is there a need to do technology assessments in association with that? Does that fall upon us to do that? That's part of it.
As Phil will describe, BARCT analysis is part of our rulemaking effort. Phil?
Yeah, so part of our reclaim transition is to look at existing rules, because we already have a lot of BARCT rules for non-reclaimed facilities, but we're also looking at where we need new rules that will amend existing rules to handle ex-reclaimed facilities. So there will likely be a few new BARCT assessments, ones that haven't been done in some time, but there's also a lot that's already on the books that we just need to carry towards the reclaimed facility.
Could you speak to the timing challenge and the resource challenge?
So 617 says that by the end of next year, we need to adopt an implementation schedule for BARCT, which staff has been taking it. The way we adopt BARCT implementation is by rule. So we're going to try to get at least some of the major rules that need to be done to the board by the end of next year. And then the implementation date for BARCT, the latest implementation date would be the end of 2023. So this is the challenge that we're working through with the reclaim group.
What does that mean to you from an FTE perspective?
Yeah, so that's a lot of rulemaking in the next 16 months. So we estimate, quite a
Made a mistake in taking my shot.
like 10 rules or amendments in the next 12 to 16 months, which is going to require quite a bit of effort to get the funding.
Good stuff.
We'll be able to, hopefully bring some people on or shuffle staff and find a way to handle that workload.
Dr. Parker, could you make sure that your mics are muted? We're hearing some background noise. The question I have is that we are phasing out reclaim. And so how is that going to be coordinated with this 617 requirement on the BARCT analysis for reclaim?
Well, essentially that part of 617 was intended, it was probably developed because of our reclaim program. It essentially gives us shows us the intent of the legislature to speed up our schedule a little bit. And so we're going to do the best we can to meet those deadlines.
Okay. I wonder if, I know that you all are working on the reclaim. I've looked at our reports. It might be a good idea to give a report to the Stationary Source Committee on where you are with that. Maybe at the next Stationary Source Committee meeting.
Yeah, so next Friday.
Oh, it is, okay, good, okay. All right, okay, and then at that point too, it'd be good to talk about 617 and how those are gonna work together. Okay. All right, let's see. The next thing we have is the Home Rule Advisory Group, which is a written report. And is there any other business to come before the committee? Seeing none. Public comment period. Would anyone want to make a public comment either here or in any remote location? No, they're not jumping up. Here, is anyone there? I don't see anyone. All right, with that, we will adjourn our next regular committee meeting on October 13th. Oh, wait a minute, Dr. Burke, do you have a question?
No, I was motioning to Paul.
Oh, all right. Then with that, we will adjourn this meeting. Thank you all. Okay.